Dr. Rob Smith. I'm a performance psychologist, and what that means is that I help people improve at whatever it is that they do, whether it's sports, music, school, business, and so on. And I also have a background in basketball where I played at high school and college level, and I also coached at the high school level for 3 years. And the reason why I'm shooting this video is to go over with my collective experience, to go over what are the mechanics of basketball from a shooting perspective. And then what I'd like to do is also go in a little bit into what the mind needs to do in order to allow you to shoot properly for a consistent, effective shooting performance. Today, what I'm going to make sure we cover are the basic basketball fundamentals for just a set shot. Not the jump shot, that'll be in a future video. What I want to make sure we have the basic mechanics, the one-handed and the two-handed shot. And this is going to be geared more toward the teen and adult group because the hands are going to be above the head when shooting as opposed to shooting from the chest, which you have to do when you're younger and can't quite get it up there over your head. But what I'm also going to do is make sure that you realize that even if you're an expert shooter, I might say a thing or two that might actually be helpful for you just to maybe review it, or heck, maybe you can send me a review when you watch it and just let me know how you think I did. For the average shooter, you're definitely going to be able to pick up some pointers on how to refine what you're currently doing and to refine your practices. And for the beginner, well, my goodness, grab yourself a notebook because this is going to change your world. Basketball shooting. There are 3 things that a ball needs to do in order to get in the hoop. All right? It has to be lined up properly. It has to have enough distance, not too much, not too little. And it has to have enough arc to go inside a basket. And I'm going to cover each one of those. But all the mechanics we're going to cover today are geared toward helping you accomplish those 3 things. And I'm resisting the urge, but I'm going to say it anyway, the Holy Trinity. You're going to need the right alignment, and we're going to talk about how to do that, the right depth and distance, as well as arc. So the first thing that we're going to cover and talk about when it comes to aligning yourself to the basket is the placement of your feet. Now, if you're a right-handed shooter, then your right foot will be forward and the left foot will be back a little bit. Now, it's not going to be a lot. It's going to be about maybe a half a foot behind your lead foot. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to organize or align yourself so that your hip, your shoulder, and ultimately your elbow and wrist and everything else could be lined up more easily to the target. All right? So as you're going to release the ball, you want to make sure that you line it up perfectly to the target. The elbow, when you go to release it, if you go to release it, you want to make sure, just like a gun, if it's pointed at the target, it will definitely, the ball will hit the target. Whether it's too far or too short, that is up for grabs, right? But we're going to also talk about hand placement in a little bit, but the hand placement will also allow for that ball to be properly lined up once you release it. Well, again, I'm a righty, so I'm going to shoot with my right hand, and we're going to walk you through a series of steps in front of the basket where we're going to just use one hand because that's going to allow you to feel that you're going to just work on this one part of the shot. The other component is the non-shooting hand, which holds the ball in place, and we're going to talk about that. As you go to release the ball, you want it to feel comfortable in your hands. I actually encourage players, before they go up to the free throw line and they have time to shoot, what I like for them to do is I like for them just to feel the texture of the ball, feel its shape, the seams on the ball. Those are there for a reason. They allow your fingers to grip the ball as you go to release. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I'm a right-handed shooter, and whether you're righty or lefty, what you're going to do is you're going to organize, or line up your hand rather, on the ball, and aligning your hand in such a way so that your index finger is in the middle. I like to have it perpendicular to one of the seams, and I always, if I have the time, I'll put my thumb and my pinky in one of the seams so that I have the ball lined up like this with my other finger spread out nice and wide, so that, again, I have plenty of control over the ball. And as I go to release it, what I'll do is I'll be releasing it in such a way that the pointer finger ends up going right toward the basket. So the good news is that you have 100% control over where that ball goes, especially when you have time and there's nobody in your face about to swat the ball away. Right now, we're just working on the mechanics. As an experiment, try putting on a pair of winter gloves and shooting, and you'll find that it's hard to control the ball because the gloves break contact with your fingertips so that the ball slides around a little bit, and it's much less accurate. Let's talk a little bit about your knees. Your knees are important because they are actually where a fair amount of the strength and the force of your shot comes from. As a matter of fact, the closer you are, the less knee, but you still flex it a little bit. The deeper you are, the more you got to bend your knees because it can't all be just an arm shot. If you have an arm shot, then what's going to happen is you're going to start, especially as you go farther and farther out, you're going to break down in terms of your technique. So we're going to work on bending the knees just a little bit when we're in close and a little bit deeper and deeper. And what you're going to do is the shot actually begins from the ground up. Finally, the last thing we're going to talk about are your eyes. Your eyes, when you lock on a target, have to actually be accurate in terms of where they're locking on, and not just in terms of what you think you're looking at, but also that your eyes may lock in and a little bit too narrow or a little bit too close or a little bit too far without even realizing it. And a simple way to test that is to take a string. Now I have it hooked up to a basket here. You could hook it to a doorknob, it doesn't matter. But take a string and look down, and I have a rope tied here. So what I do is when I put it up to my nose like this, and I happen to put a little clip right there on the string midway between. So what I do is I look at that clip, and what happens is effectively I see two ropes, because that's what happens. You'll see two ropes, and where they join is where my eyes are locking in. But when you look at it down this thing, and if for some reason the ropes that you see in your eyes, the two images, if they merge before the target that you think you're looking at, then your eyes are going to be underestimating the distance. So it's going to actually be farther away than your eyes think it is. If the ropes merge after the target you're looking at, then it actually is closer than you imagine. And so naturally, if your eyes are not locked in properly on the target, you're not going to have depth perception and accuracy for you to be able to judge the range of your shot. And the target is not the front of the rim. It's not the back of the rim. It's actually in the center and the space in between. In order to hit that space inside the rim, you're going to have the proper arc for it to come in over the rim and into the basket. The ideal arc, now get this is going to be tough without a protractor, is 52 degrees. So I don't know how they figured that out, but somebody did in terms of maximum accuracy. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to have a super flat shot, as I talked about earlier. But we also can't throw a rainbow shot that hits the ceiling, or just about scrapes the ceiling and comes back down, which would be the maximum area or margin of error would allow your ball to have more error. But it turns effectively into a much farther shot if you're throwing it way up in the sky. So what you want to do is to have a more efficient shot is to have it not so high that it feels like a half-court shot from the free throw line, but also not so flat that it will scrape the rim on the way by and then kick out. If your head is leaning in one direction or another, and people who do gymnastics and diving and other acrobatic-like sports will understand that as soon as you point your head one way, your body kind of wants to follow it. So it tends to be, it's the heaviest part of your body, so it tends to move you around a little bit. So if you have your head lined up over your body and your eyes facing the basket and your knees are flexed, you're going to have a good balance and a good base from which you're going to shoot the shot. So what I'm going to describe right now is the shooting hand mechanics and the knees and everything we talked about before. And I'm going to start in really close. And I'm going to go over all the little details that go into shooting, which is way too much for your brain to take in all at once. So if you haven't heard any of this stuff before, don't feel like you have to remember it all. But it's come with practice. It's going to come as you go through repetitions. And then your mind eventually, once you practice this enough, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, it's going to shift gradually from thinking mind, which does problem solving and analyzing and all the things that we're talking about here, to sensing mind. Sensing mind is when the body just remembers. Your body has a memory just like your mind has a memory, and your body will remember what's required, and that's what we ideally, when you're shooting your best, you're going to actually be going into sensing mind. In a future video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to get yourself there a little bit more effectively, but for now, you're going to see me when I'm shooting the two-handed shot. I'm going to take a breath before every shot because that'll allow me to get more into sensing mind. All right, so when we talk about shooting with the one hand, I'm going to start up just 5 feet away, and what I did was I took a little dry erase marker, and you can do this so you can quickly erase it off the floor. If you're outside, just use a chalk. But I took a tape measure, and I measured out 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, and 15 feet. And I'm stopping at the free throw line because effectively, if we're shooting just a set shot, we're probably not going to be shooting anything other than a free throw when you're playing. So we're going to line up, and I'm going to put my hand, as I talked about it before, in the center of the ball so that my thumb and my forefinger, my pinky, are in the groove, and then my forefinger's in the middle of the ball. And I'm just going to take my one hand and raise it up so that my elbow is aligned. You notice how my right foot is forward since I'm a right-hander. If you're a lefty, then you're going to be lining up with your left foot. And then that allows your shoulder, elbow, wrist, and the knuckle of your index finger to be all lined up on the line. And as it turns out, I happen to be lucky enough to be standing on a basketball court where there's a black line going dead center. So literally, if my whole body was aligned with this, and that line goes right through the center of the hoop, I'm in perfect shape right now to be able to shoot this shot. So all I need to do is, with my knees bent slightly, is I'm going to release my knees and then push the ball toward the basket. I'm going to finish up with that follow through so that I have that little, they call it the gooseneck, and that's the rotation of the wrist from here all the way over to here, and then my pointer finger will be dead center in the hoop. And that'll be because that's where I want the ball to go. If I point it over to the right, the ball would go that way. If I point over to the left, the same thing happens. So I notice that when I'm shooting live, if I'm playing against somebody, and if I do a follow through and my hand kind of does one of those things, because it does so when you're in the middle of action, then what happens is that's where the ball's going to go, and I missed a shot, and I better run in for that rebound. The reason why you want your fingers to go all the way through the ball is because you want to create what you see is like a backward spin on the ball. As I release the ball here, I'm creating a backward spin. And why a backspin is important versus a side spin, which is what happens when you shoot it with two hands, and sometimes it comes off at a bit of an angle like this or this, is that if for some reason the ball were to make contact with the rim, the momentum of the ball would die down and then it has a chance to go in. If you have it spinning any other way than backspin, what might happen is that the ball will kick off the rim and there's no chance of making that shot. Once I make 10 shots from this distance, I feel like I have it down enough to move back 2 feet to now the 7-foot range, all right? So I'm just stepping back to the other marker I made, progressively 2 feet at a time, and then I just shoot it from there. Same thing is true. I want to just make sure my knees are flexed a little bit more. The farther out I go, the more my knees are going to bend because I need to be able to push. And if I do it with just my arm, I can still do just arm from here, but I'm going to get in the habit of using my legs because that's where we're going to get our touch and, of course, our strength. The shot, literally, the kinetic energy starts in my feet and work all the way out to the end of my fingertips, and the ball takes off from there. Just get in the habit of working the shape of your shot so that the arc has enough wiggle room for a mistake. If you're just off a little bit, you have a greater margin of error. I'm stepping back to the next level, which is 9 feet, progressively working my way back to the free throw line. Some people I've noticed in their shots have the one hand like in front of their face. I find that to be very distracting. I have to look around or through my wrist. So I try to line it up just a little bit so that my hand is over my shoulder, so that if I brought the ball down, it would come down on my shoulder, not on my face. So it's very important while you're shooting the shot to be able to have it lined up in such a way. The farther away that you go, the more you got to bend your knees. And now from 13 feet, I'm almost at the free throw line. When I bounce the ball, when I'm about ready to shoot my free throws, I always tell the clients I work with that you should bounce the ball about as hard as it would take for you to make the shot. So in other words, I'm actually giving my arm a chance to feel what it needs to feel like to shoot that shot from this distance. And then finally, I graduate to free throw distance. 15 feet. It's a little bit harder to make it with one hand, but it shouldn't be. It just feels a little bit harder because it feels a lot more stable to have the second hand on there. But I'm still going to be able to shoot it this way. Again, the critical part is bending my knees a little bit more just to get the distance. So now, after successfully working the shot so that you can get the one-handers from all these different levels, now it's time to move to the second hand. The second hand is very important. So we talked about the alignment of the first hand, where you have your thumb and your pinky in the groove. All that's going to stay the same. The only thing that is going to change from this shot is that your other hand is going to come alongside and just hold it in place. And as I go to release it, I'm going to just simply let my hand release from the shot. I'm not going to shoot it with my hand. I'm going to just follow the ball in its path a little bit and then release it, and still release it from that one hand. So you're doing nothing different in the two-handed shot that you were doing in the one-handed shot, other than you're allowing the ball to stay more firmly in your shooting hand as you're releasing it. And I'll mention again, when I talked before about sensing mind, you're creating a little bit of a connection with the feeling of releasing the ball from this distance. The other thing that I like to do is I like to take a deep breath, because a deep breath, you'll often see shooters when they're at the free throw line taking that deep breath. And what that does is that helps to calm themselves and to bring themselves back here to the present moment. Being in the present instead of worrying about missing the shot or the last play where the referee didn't make the call. What you want to do is you want to get out of all that thought process and into sensing mind. And the quicker way of doing that is to take a deep breath and then to focus in on the kinesthetic sense of bouncing the ball. So I take a deep breath and I bounce the ball until I feel the right feeling. So now you have the basics for how to practice the proper mechanics of the two-handed shot. Hopefully, you'll be able to take some of these principles and now put it into practice in order to make it automatic, to shift from thinking mind as you think an awful lot about each one of these steps into sensing mind. Remember, take that deep breath, but the only thing that's going to allow you to really make that shift is practice. You've heard the phrase, repetition is the mother of all learning. Now, that would also mean that if you don't practice it correctly, you'll learn the wrong thing. So some of you may have started shooting or didn't have right coaching or nobody corrected your technique. So you've gotten into some bad habits that will hurt the effectiveness of your shot. So we're hopeful that this video will allow you to learn some of the right mechanics so that you can practice them. But just like I'm videotaping my shooting, you can have your friend videotape you, or your family member can videotape you so that you can watch your mechanics to see how it looks. On my basketball, you may have noticed, but I have a word on there which says Kaizen. I write it on the ball because I want to remind myself of the Japanese term which means a state of continuous improvement. That is your goal. You do not want to be locked into being perfect or to being upset with yourself for things not working out right away. You want to have some patience in this process and to not get angry with yourself if you don't get it right away. You will have to focus on progress, and in order to do that, you should track your progress. You should write it down in a notebook, get a notebook out, write the date, and then write the results of your practice. Take some notes, talk about like what you feel excited about or what you're frustrated with. If somebody is videotaping you, then they can look at it and give a proper analysis of what it is that you're doing in order to become a better shooter. So I just want to wish you good luck in your journey. Stay tuned. There will be other videos that I'll be doing that will allow you to practice Kaizen, to become to enter into the state of continuous learning. And hopefully you'll have a chance to watch some of my other videos, which are going to talk about the jump shot, hook shot, and as well as the mental mechanics on what it takes to become a good basketball player and a great shooter. Thanks, and Kaizen.